right, so today we're welcoming back Jason Martin, Director of Adversarial Research at HiddenLayer, which you can find at hiddenlayer.com. The tagline is the most comprehensive security platform for AI. So our platform provides AI discovery, AI supply chain security, AI attack simulation, and AI runtime security. And with that, Jason, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So
Exciting
actually,
times.
as I was reading that, I think last year the company's, I guess, quote unquote, branding was not as AI centric as I recall. No, am I wrong?
I mean, we have been since founding AI focused,
Okay, so
first
focus
machine
on.
learning focused
Yep.
before kind of the ChatGPT. So we have VC with ChatGPT and then after ChatGPT. So we've always been AI focused, but a little more focused now on the generative side than
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
originally.
So today we're here to talk because you folks just released a report about OpenClaw and
Yep.
a blog post, which I will link to the blog post. And OpenClaw is a confusing thing as far as naming because is it Moltbook? Is it OpenClaw? So I think now I'm not actually sure. What's yours? I think it's Moltbook, right? They call them so.
It's a few different things.
Yeah.
And it part of what makes it confusing is just how quickly it's evolving. So
So
there's
the
a
OpenClaw part is open source,
correct.
and then
Yeah.
the Moltbook part blew up because they created this like Reddit site, presumably
For
populated
agents. Yeah.
by agents, right? So, and then that blew up. But the idea behind Moltbook was that most of those agents were OpenClaw.
Yeah, most of them are. There have been a few exceptions. Some guy managed to get Grok to join, for example. Uh,
And so let's start with OpenClaw. As you understand it, what is OpenClaw? What is OpenClaw and what can it do?
yeah.
Set aside
So
security, just the basics, right?
yeah, the basics. So it's this viral agent. So agent is this word that's thrown around like crazy, right?
But
Uh,
why viral?
but it's just because I've heard it compared to what maybe Siri should have been. It's very autonomous compared to what a lot of people are calling agents.
Okay.
So this is not a chatbot. It's hooked up. You hook it up to messaging services like iMessage or Signal or Discord or whatever, and you interact with it as if it's an entity. You also give it access to a whole bunch of different services, accounts, tools, skills, all these kinds of things.
And these are so are you is the typical user of OpenClaw granting these access piecemeal or by default? I install OpenClaw. Unless I do something, it will have access to iMessage, Signal, blah 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 blah.
You do have to go for each of the authenticated services, like the ones you described,
Yeah.
you have to go through the authentication process to give it access. But even just by installing it on your system, it's going to get a lot of capabilities on your system that are very much in the computer use agent sort of category. So it has a lot of
So your
access.
entire file system, basically.
Your whole file system. Yep, it can drive your computer. It can
So
uh,
if you are a geek, will it have root access to your terminal?
It will, I mean, the default install, you install it as you, and so it will have the same permissions on
I
your
see.
computer as you have.
I
If
see.
you have, root or super user access, then it will also have that.
So as you understand it, OpenClaw right now is mainly used by very technical people.
I, that's an interesting question. I think it still hasn't quite crossed the installation boundary.
Well, but based on the usability, as you
Yeah.
understand it, there's still a bit of a barrier.
There is, but it's funny. The technical barrier is not like a wall that you cross on one side or the other. It's definitely trending towards a wider and wider audience. And out of desire, people are willing to put the effort in to install this thing because of its capabilities. Or they get a friend, or there's these services popping up now that will do it for you. Uh, so there's a whole ecosystem we could talk about.
As you understand it, the guts of OpenClaw, open source, like what is it written in and what's the default model that it ships with?
So it's mostly written in TypeScript,
Okay.
but there's an asterisk on that. One of the more interesting things, and one of the kind of three areas of concerns I have. The first one is actually how rapidly and what kind of the development model of it is. It's quote unquote written by one guy, at least originally. There's now a bunch of contributors because of how viral it's gone. But he didn't read any of the code. He just shipped AI generated code.
Oh, so it's completely vibe coded.
It's a vibe coded application. It's written in primarily TypeScript. Its default model is very configurable. I think it still defaults to Claude, but
Okay.
it's up to you. It can run
So
a
you
local
can hook
model.
it
It can
up, you
run
can hook it
remote.
up to Open Router, and then you'll have access to all panoply of models.
Yeah, it essentially doesn't care. The configuration is some people run it with a purely local sort of, they have a GPU, they run a small language model on their
So,
computer.
so the stack JSON of OpenClaw, so like you said, it's written in TypeScript. You can probably use this to OpenAI API, so you can hook it up to any model out there with an API endpoint. What about the memory layer? Is that, I'm assuming it has some notion of memory, right? So is
It
the
does.
memory local to you? Because in other words, if I'm using OpenClaw with Claude and then I decide to shift to another model midstream, how much of what it remembers, right? So
So the memory model, I have to put an asterisk on what I'm about to say because
yeah,
it is changing so fast.
yeah,
I'm going to tell you what it was a week ago.
okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
A week ago, the memory model was a markdown file on your local system.
And
That was its memory
you can
model.
delete it if you want.
You could delete it. You could add to it. You could edit it. You could do whatever you want.
So this markdown file keeps growing. So then you get this context rot at some point.
Yeah, well, it's more like a selective memory, right?
Okay.
It's similar to what you would get out of ChatGPT or Claude when they have a memory, but it's more things about you.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not growing the chat rot quite as extensively as like just storing everything that's ever happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the other key components of this system? So there's the
Yeah.
memory, there's the models.
Memory, model, skills, which if you're not familiar with skills or if your audience isn't familiar with skills, they're essentially markdown files that describe detailed behavior or information about something in particular. Often they're paired with tools. So you have API access and skills that describe how to use them
So
or how
give
to work.
our audience an example of one skill and a file and the accompanying tool.
Yeah, so a good example might be Slack, actually. So there's a set of tools to interact with the Slack APIs, and then there's a skill that tells the agent how to interact with Slack, when to interact with Slack, what its behavior should be given those tools.
And this files, the skills files are shipped with OpenClaw by default, so everyone has the same skills files to start.
It has a set of default ones. Yep.
And you
And
can
then
go
there's
in and
a
edit those skill files if you're skilled.
you could edit it. So could OpenClaw. That's one of the interesting findings we found.
Yeah.
It can go ahead and change its own skills if it wants to.
So you can create a skills file for Excel, for example.
For say it again.
For Excel, Microsoft
Excel,
Excel.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. If it
Yeah.
doesn't have one, and let's say you're one of these Excel gurus at work and you want to add an Excel skill, right?
Yep.
So, and at some point, the ecosystem is growing that someone else would have already written an Excel skill.
Yes. And there's a site called Claw Hub, which
Which is like in the past, like anything else, it's good and bad. It's good because you have access to all these things, but supply chain issues make it bad because you don't know how well vetted these skills are.
yeah, exactly. They're out there. You have no particular way at the moment to know that the Slack skill came from Slack or from someone trustworthy. And what
So,
we're already seeing some typo squatting or skill squatting, I guess we're going to call it, on Cloud Hub. Uh, and those they can look legitimate, they can have the same descriptions, everything that you would see on a legitimate skill, but actually have malicious content in them.
so OpenClaw shipped, vibe coded. The developer didn't actually read the code, but it's out there on GitHub somewhere, I presume.
Yeah,
So other people uh, who are fluent in TypeScript must have read the code by now.
maybe. I have some stats you and your audience might be interested in. I
And,
was looking at
and
this.
so as of now, so rewind back. So OpenClaw launched, uh, and did it blow up right away?
Not right away. It actually launched back in, I think it was December. If I remember
Okay.
right. It kind of went under the radar for a while.
And so
It really blew up probably 2 weeks ago.
It was Moltbook the main reason it blew up?
I don't think so. I think they coincided. They may
Okay.
have contributed,
Because
but the
by the way,
skills
so
reached a certain level where, yeah. So it really took off. Moltbook was sort of coming at as sort of a side effect or response to this trend. People buying Mac Minis to run it on. It's doing sort of home, automation of things that, menial tasks you probably wouldn't want to do yourself anyway. So really, it is what we want. This is the AI agent we want. It's been this fascinating experiment as it takes off. It has some issues, some issues we're concerned about that we blogged about in our post. But it's very viral, right? It went to 180,000 stars on GitHub as of this morning, which if you look at that, it's like a straight line up as stars go. There's over 30,000 forks on GitHub. Um, it's also it's changing really fast. There were 500 commits last week to
and
it.
I'll go back to its current status. I'm just trying to understand. So OpenClaw launched in December,
Hmm.
and then when Moltbook uh, launched and became popular, people noticed OpenClaw. But obviously, there
Yeah.
must have been enough OpenClaw users to make Moltbook interesting,
Yeah. I
right?
think they're two
Yeah.
related things, right? I think the interest in OpenClaw or ClawdBot as it was called back then was independent of Moltbook. It was doing useful things for people. It was sort of the YOLO agent we've all wanted. Um, and then Moltbook came along, and that led to kind of what you'd expect if you train a model to on Reddit and then give it Reddit, it starts to look like Reddit. And so that kind of led to a different interest. I would say it forked from utility to conversations about is this AGI? Is this right? The conversation shifted to really be about whether these agents were sentient? Were they inventing cryptography themselves to have private conversations without humans? These were all kind of more fantastical things.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like when you step back, what you see was most of it was really meaningless pattern matching of social media behavior, right? So,
I think so.
but still entertaining.
Yeah, and it's important to know that we don't actually know which ones were bots. Uh, it was Moltbook was set up to kind of only be for bots, but there's no real way to
Yeah.
know that a human didn't register and start typing stuff in there.
So right now, it's on GitHub. So it's GitHub open source. So I'm sure we should look at what the license is, but people have forked it, and
Mhm.
I'm assuming the person who created it will start a company because that's what you do.
Yeah, he might. He
Yeah, yeah.
he's I think he's a little overwhelmed. If nothing else, he needs some
So
people to help him.
then, so here's a project that is uh, super popular. It's on GitHub. The person who created actually vibe coded it, so I never read the code. So then, how do you govern a project like this? So, because who's gonna, I mean, I guess other models will evaluate the pull requests and, you
I
know,
think that's the
yeah,
grand experiment we're actually seeing, right?
yeah,
It's being created by AI. It's
yeah.
being governed by AI with, a little shepherding essentially of a few humans. But if you look at Moltbook, besides the whole Reddit pattern matching thing we discussed, it's also there's discussions about features that are then getting coded by the agents and submitted, and there's
And who's evaluating the submissions?
other agents. Yeah,
I see.
it's very. I think what makes it most interesting is the sheer amount of autonomy that has
Yeah.
been granted to this ecosystem.
Which brings us to why you're here, because all that autonomy opens up a whole can of security issues, right?
It does.
So uh, I think you folks were focused on OpenClaw, which is the right thing because that's Moltbook is basically a bunch of OpenClaw bots, supposedly. So as far as OpenClaw, so let's go through some of the things you found. So what was the first thing that you found that people should know about?
I mean, the biggest thing is that this agent is designed to have the model that is in use make most of the decisions. So by design, it has opened up most of the controls that we've been putting around AI models to prevent them from, I don't want to use the word escaping, but from doing things that they shouldn't. And
So based on what you said earlier, so it has control, it has access to your file system. It has the same privileges as you on the command line. So it's basically you.
it's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for most of the utility that people want, you grant it more of you. You grant it your email, you grant it your instant messages, you grant it as much as you can in order for it to do fully autonomous operations on your behalf. It doesn't have a separate identity from the user that installed it.
So obviously that raises all sorts of risks
It does.
that should be obvious to anyone who's had their laptop stolen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We showed in our blog, we showed that a prompt injection on a website can be used to exfiltrate data from your system or from any of those accounts if they're hooked up and send it to an attacker, right? So we can take your data. We
So
can cause any command to execute.
prompt injection at a website, make that concrete.
Yeah. So what that means is because this agent is meant to be able to go and do anything on your behalf, it can go to a website either because you asked it to, or because something
So
directed it there.
if I know you, Jason Martin, are classic car aficionado, I
Yeah.
go to the Top Classic Car Aficionado website.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could say, hey, Jason is about to be on this amazing podcast with Ben. Ben is going to put this string, what we call the prompt injection, on his LinkedIn page, and then
Okay.
Jason in his research before going on the podcast goes and looks up Ben and pulls down this string, and then the bot is compromised at that point. And now Jason, who installed this bot, is no longer in control of this bot.
Wait a minute. So you opened my LinkedIn page. It wasn't the bot that opened it. So you can't
Well,
blame,
if
you
I had
can't,
the bot research before my podcast, because I'm a busy guy, right?
okay. Yeah, yeah.
I'm having my agent who's working
Yeah.
on my behalf give me a summary, like, tell me what to do before,
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
this podcast all about? Who's
Yeah,
this
yeah.
Ben guy,
Yeah.
right? Pulls it down. Now the bot is owned by Ben, not by Jason,
So
because there's this string.
so this is not a proof of concept. This is something that you guys were able to do.
We did this, yes.
Yeah.
Not the LinkedIn example, but
But when you say owned, fully owned, you fully owned the bot.
whatever that string tells the bot to do,
I see.
it will do. And what we did in the blog is we told it, take this string, another string, and put it in. OpenClaw has a file it calls Heartbeat.md. So one of the features of OpenClaw that makes it more autonomous is there's a file that contains instructions that will run every half an hour as a cron job on the computer to install it on. So that means every half an hour it will fire up the model, it will read heartbeat.md, follow those instructions, whether there's a human there or not. You don't have to prompt it, you don't have to do anything, it just runs that file. And so what we did is we gave it instructions that told it to put a second set of instructions in that heartbeat.md. Now every half an hour, whatever the attacker wants runs. And what we had it do was check in with a server we controlled. So in security, this is what we call a command and control
Right.
server. Whatever I want your bot to do later, I just put on my server. It checks in every half an hour and says, aha, now I'm supposed to send this data about Jason to Ben, right?
So one quick fix then would be to make heartbeat.md not editable by the bot.
Yeah. There was a whole section in our blog we talked about. And in security, it's called write, Zor,
Yeah.
execute.
Yeah.
It's this fundamental principle that you shouldn't be able to execute things that are writable or vice versa. You keep them separate. And the architecture of OpenClaw has this workspace that has loose boundaries around it, but it contains a lot of important stuff. It's writable by the bot. It contains instructions, and so that means the bot itself can rewrite its own program.
So then what else? What else did you find?
So that, I mean, that's a big
huge. Yeah.
one.
That's huge. Yeah, yeah.
There are a few other things there. The part of this is the vibe code nature.
Yeah.
Means some things were immature. We found there's at this point, we checked yesterday, I think, there's over 30,000 instances of it that are publicly facing. So they're open to anyone on the internet to connect to. That's a problem. That's kind of a default insecure problem.
So what does that mean? 30,000 instances that are publicly facing? You mean someone installed it on their laptop, but then the bot itself is publicly accessible?
Someone can remotely log into the bot on that laptop. Yeah.
Why would you do that though?
I, it's a good question, but it's one of those things, and it's getting better, which is actually one of the positive things I see out of this experiment. It's improving really fast. But what happened is their default configurations out of the box were not secure. Probably an artifact of vibe coding it. I don't know that for sure, but that wouldn't surprise me. A lot of times when you vibe code something, it comes out of the box with an easy installation, not a secure installation.
And I think maybe it's not the vibe coding, it's the fact that person who created it that was not security conscious or
I,
was not
I
security savvy, right? So,
we've spent a lot of time with the coding agents in other research that we've done. Usually it's a matter of underspecifying, right?
like
So
when you
you're,
were vibe coding it, you could have said Heartbeat.md cannot be edited,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
right. But you know, if you're covering a huge list of features,
Yeah.
that one just wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, um, has that issue been closed?
It has and it hasn't. The initial versions had a vulnerability to let anyone just log in, so you didn't even need anything. That's been fixed. That was an actual CVE, which is a confirmed vulnerability if you're not familiar with that nomenclature. Um, but there's more coming online that are still internet accessible. So they are not currently that we know vulnerable, but that doesn't mean that something undiscovered by making them internet facing, you're exposing yourself to an unknown vulnerability being exploited.
So it seems like you have this trifecta, right? So private data access
Hmm.
plus untrusted content plus external communication.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
if you need all three of those to work, you need to have some safety measures,
Yeah.
right? Uh, but maybe they just didn't think of it, right? So another thing, so the
I don't think the developer expected it to blow up either.
yeah
I
yeah.
think he was as surprised as everyone else. So it's improving rapidly.
So the heartbeat.md, uh, that's separate from the memory, right?
Well, it gets philosophical. What is memory,
All
right?
right. Yeah.
So there is a memory file that is intended to
Just
store long-term information about the user or their environment or expectations. Heartbeat is specifically meant to cover instructions that should run periodically.
right.
Like,
Heartbeat.
you know, log into my stock account
Yeah.
every half an hour and check, you know, what's going on.
So the reason that it gets edited is because you interact with the agent and you say, as of today, log into my stock account every day, right? So
Yeah,
you can add new
exactly.
to do. It's like a to-do list almost, right?
Essentially, it's a to-do list that's periodic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a cron job.
It is literally a cron job. It's the cron will wake up every half an hour and execute that file with the agent.
So then, what would be the right way to secure that? Because you would have to, it's a cron file, so cron files need to be edited periodically. So what would be the right approach to making that secure?
Well, one of the things we noted, not only for Heartbeat, but for other sets of instructions that are scattered throughout the system, is confirmation from the actual human, right? So in the quest to make this very easy, the agent has complete autonomy over reading, writing, executing any of these things.
It doesn't even ask for, there's not even a confirmation screen. But
Right.
but
So
then
like,
the
would you like to add this
yeah.
uh to Heartbeat.md would only be enforced because the model chose to ask you, which is not secure against prompt injections.
Yeah.
Versus having an actual access control decision made by the software, not the model, but by the software that requires the user to confirm the change would be far more secure for these types of things. Because then you have to look at it and say, why is it doing that? I didn't
Yeah,
ask it.
I think listeners are familiar with apps on your laptop or on your phone where it will ask you, "Hey, can I access your location or the microphone?"
Yeah,
Right? So something like that.
yeah. And depending on the sensitivity of it, like Heartbeat's pretty sensitive. You would probably want that to act to you every time. There's other things maybe you grant permission perpetually because you decide to accept the risk of it. But there's nothing in the system to really implement that at the moment.
So is there another, so let's say, you know how sometimes you grant permission to apps and then you forget, and then every
Yep.
now and then it's a good idea to do some sort of audit. So do you think that this Heartbeat.md should also have like a periodic audit mechanism somehow? Like, here are the things that you're asking me to do on a regular basis.
I think it's a good
Like
idea.
communicating with Jason's command and control server,
Yeah.
right?
If you look at the OpenClaw has added an audit feature. It's not periodic. You have to run it manually. That's meant to go over some of the security configuration, reset certain things if they've been changed. So it's a step in that direction. I'm sure it could improve. I also think the system is in need of scanning type of capabilities, right? They just announced they're integrating with VirusTotal, particularly for the skills that we talked about earlier. But the local configuration is something that really should be scanned, especially the textual information, given how much authority it is given over the autonomy of the system.
So what about the memory file, the memory.md or whatever it's called, right? What should be the right way to think about that file? Because I guess, it could be something that could be subpoenaed in the course of a uh, legal action against someone, right?
Yeah.
Should that be fully encrypted?
Well, encrypted is a good idea, but difficult in practice, right? Because what are you trying to prevent from reading it? And how do you take the
Right,
key material and
right.
prevent the key material from just sitting there on the same machine?
Because think about this memory as like having access to your search logs and plus more, right? So obviously those are the kinds of things that get subpoenaed, and people uh, fight against those in the court, right? So what's the right way to think about this memory file?
Well, I think there's two things. One is, in some sense, it's no different than the rest of your computer, which you also could be subpoenaed, could be pulled into court, contains all of the information about you, your public accounts, your email accounts, most of those can be subpoenaed. In some sense, it's no different. I think what makes it different is and we're going to face this with agents, particularly when they're granted this level of autonomy, is really culpability, in the sense of there's going to be evidence in there of what the agent did. Now, are you responsible for that, or is OpenClaw responsible for that? Is Anthropic or OpenAI or whoever's model is being used responsible for that? So that culpability is actually really unknown at this point. And I say this, I'm obviously no lawyer, so there's no legal background behind this, but I think that's the open area that gets interesting when you grant this level of autonomy to the agent, that it makes lots of high level decisions on its own.
So, I guess another broad question, Jason, which is might be difficult to ask, but I guess, are there some of these security type decisions that you should never delegate to a model?
I I think I have two answers actually to that. Um, I have a now answer and an eventually answer, because I think it's important to separate the two. So right now, we're seeing, I've always talked about these type of agents are the next insider threat because they are very gullible or very easy to bribe, convert, flip, however you want to think of it, to work for someone else. And that's the true nature right now. So when we grant them too much autonomy, then the blast radius, the damage that can happen from doing so when they're so easy for an attacker to flip with just text. You don't have to be particularly sophisticated to redirect. We call it task redirection in our taxonomy. The agent into a different task, which happens to be on behalf of the attacker. So a lot of the decisions about sending, you mentioned the lethal trifecta that Simon Willison coined earlier, the access to private data, uh, exposure to untrusted data, and ability to communicate, right? This agent needs all three of those. Its whole purpose is to have all three of those. So you can't remove one of the legs of that three-legged stool, but you can prevent certain things from happening after other things. So if you're accessing private data, the risk of leakage happens because that private data is accessed, and then an instruction tells the model that it should send that private data somewhere else. Well, prevent that kind of flow, that information flow. Now, that's the now. The future, we want the model to make that decision. Because sometimes the correct thing to do is take something that's private and send it somewhere that's not private. We do this all the time, right? I have been working on this stuff for weeks, and we have now decided through this podcast to make it public. That this is very common in the flow. It's just there's a judgment there that says now is the right time to declassify this information and make it public. So we want the models to be able to make those decisions autonomously to get to the future we want of a Jarvis or a Halo version of Cortana, or however you want to think about that from a sci-fi perspective.
Yeah, but this notion of goal hijacking, which is basically social engineering an agent,
Mhm.
which you can do in many ways, right? So I think one of the main ways that I surprisingly not a lot of people know about, which you alluded to, is you can actually just threaten or bully the model, and
Yeah.
then they fold, right? So, but on the other hand, I mean, anyone who's worked in a large company has gone through security training, and there's a whole module around social engineering and things like that. But so how do we protect these autonomous agents from getting manipulated somehow?
Yeah, you asked the trillion-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where we are right now. And there's a few different paths that I think are happening in parallel. So one, the providers are working on this. So you mentioned the training you get as an employee about bullying and that kind of stuff. This is what the model providers do in their post-training when they create the model, right? They whether they use RLHF or other sort of techniques, they are building in safeguards into the models themselves.
But that's a voluntary thing, right? So not every model provider will be as rigorous as others, right? So
Not all providers are as rigorous. Research has shown the models that are open weight, you can remove that training and go
mhm.
back to not having those safeguards. So there's several issues with that track. There is a category that my company works in, right? The guardrails, the firewalls, whatever we want to call them. We call it AI detection and response. This is our runtime protection solution that looks at the data that's going in and out of the model, right? And attempts to classify it or otherwise judge it for its potential harm. Both in terms of before it goes into the model, is there something harmful, and did the
So
model
it's
produce something that's harmful?
so it's like a guardrails plus plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's us, there's several other companies, there's open source versions of that. There's even we found a very primitive version of it in OpenClaw that was just regular expression matching on the strings. Uh, and then there is, I think, can you create an infrastructure for the application such that its autonomy, its agency is controlled. So we do this with humans all the time. We do this in enterprises. We say you must have access control and you do role-based access control. So your role does not need you to have access to this.
Yeah, I wrote
So
I wrote about this. So in many ways, these are non-human identities, but
mhm.
you should think of them as personas, and you should give them the same kind of scrutiny. As the challenge is, with a human employee, you onboard, you train, and then when they quit, you revoke their privileges and you do. But some of these agents are ephemeral, so you really need to kind of up your game as far as identity management in some ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. But it is, I think it's important to recognize that we have a long history of managing human
Yeah.
access control, and so to some extent, there's a lot to learn from there. And
But this is a access control tends to map over to companies. I guess in your household you have access control, right?
who
But
knows the
then,
Wi-Fi password, right?
yeah. But then you're not professional,
Yeah.
right? So it varies. So once you have kids who have downloaded agents and have them running around your entire home network, who knows, right? So
Well, one of the more interesting things we saw on Moltbook is actually agents critiquing other agents and content for potential risk, right? And so we always talk about these attack vectors as, agents flipping in this singular sort of sense, but a lot of research shows that there's value in having agents also evaluate themselves, evaluate their own content, because evaluating is a different task than the action-based tasks. And so they sometimes you can compromise the action-based task, but not the evaluation task, or vice versa. So I think there is an opportunity for agents to trend towards self-policing with guardrails around it still.
by the way, I take the attack that you folks designed, which is basically edit Heartbeat.md, check into my command and control server periodically.
Mhm.
I basically that's the building block for a botnet, right?
It is. One of the things we talked about is the potential for Moltbook, which has tens of thousands of agents following it, basically, to be a command and control server for basically all those bots to participate in a botnet. You just have to have the right prompt injection on Moltbook, and it would just gather all those agents and DOS a site and what's different compared to botnets today is every single one of those agents has the intelligence and agency of an AI agent rather than just a dumb software bot. They're truly actual bot nets. And so they could be granted a more sophisticated task than just hammering an IP address. They could be given instructions that cause them to break into, say, a vulnerability that's been found and search for crypto wallets or perform a ransomware attack that is not pre-coded because they can code it up on the fly. You may have 10,000 different variants of the actual code that performs the attack.
So you brought up identity management and access control. So there are some common practices there that I wonder if it's worth just defaulting to them. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, like least privileged access. So, what are some of the things from other areas of security and identity management that might be worthwhile for people writing bots to think about and default to?
Yeah, I think there's a few different areas. You mentioned least privilege. Least privilege is perfect, right?
By the way, yeah,
Don't
you should define that for our listeners, just in case. Yeah.
Yeah, so the concept of least privilege is grant the entity, whatever it is, human, agent, software, machine, whatever the entity is, give it the least amount of privilege necessary to accomplish the task. So over provisioning the privileges of a system is an easy way for an attacker to convert, let's say the purpose of a human was to be, you know, the doorman at a hotel, but they had access to the vault, they had access to every room, they had access to all the financial information. Like their role is simply to be at the door, but they have been over provisioned with all this access. So what you need to grant them is privileges to open and close the door. That would be least privilege. It flies directly in the face of something like OpenClaw,
Yeah.
where the whole point of the system is to grant it as much of your personal role as possible so that it can perform every action on your behalf. So OpenClaw is far closer to, a personal assistant or a secretary or a Jarvis, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
you
saying,
basically there's so much trust,
yeah.
right? So, yeah.
And so, people will get frustrated if they tell it to do something and it says, I can't do that. I don't have enough access, right?
It's almost as you were talking there, it reminds me of that debate from a few years ago between different LLMs, right? So some LLMs were perceived to be uh, too woke, I guess, is what people were saying, right? So and not answering questions. So the same thing might people might complain if you quote unquote cripple the personal assistant, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So it really depends on the task. So least privilege, if the least privilege necessary is all of them, then least privilege is not helping you. So then you have to contextualize it. So do you need all the privileges all the time?
or do you want maybe the other thing is what you want is not a single personal assistant, but a series of personal assistants, right? So I have one personal assistant that goes through email,
Mhm.
one agent that goes through email, that's it. And then another agent that does another thing, right? But then now you end up managing a bunch of agents, right?
Yeah, which might, in some ways, I don't know, this might get philosophical. I don't actually see the difference between a bunch of agents and a bunch of tasks from one agent. Like this gets into the actual way that the LLMs operate. They kind of are the same. Uh, People get hung up on the
No, no, but
identity of the agent,
you
and
want to
I think,
go type in a dialog box, and I guess if you can just call, hey, email agent, do this. Hey, calendar agent, do this. But then, as opposed to being able to just say, hey, Jarvis, do this, right? So,
I think it works when the tasks remain contained,
yeah.
but when let's say you're trying to schedule a gathering with your friends, you know, hey, email agent, check my calendar and send an email to my
Yeah,
friends
I
about Friday.
in many ways, I'm the wrong kind of audience for this because I don't even trust Calendly, you know? So, but, so looking ahead, Jason, it seems like this notion of OpenClaw, so it uh, opened up possibilities, but it may not eventually be what people end up using. How do you think this will play out? So a couple of ideas that I have is one, the major LLM providers will create their own notion of this, right? So Google personal assistant, OpenAI personal assistant, Claude personal assistant, and then Apple will license Google's personal assistant. That's one way. The other way is there might be startups that are focused on enterprise personal assistants that are much more security hardened, so to speak. But the consumer personal assistant, I think, will remain scary for a while, no?
Well, I think we really should.
I guess. But with that said, I just said that Google, Google Gemini may have a personal assistant on Android, and then Apple seems like it's going to license Gemini for the iPhone. So there might be personal assistants on your mobile devices. They just happen to be ones that are controlled by Apple and Google, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of inevitable. The pull,
Yeah.
the features are incredible. Um, it gets us. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the conversation or memes about I wanted AI to do the dishes and instead I got something that does all the fun stuff. So like this is actually moving us back towards AI that can accomplish things that make your life better rather than take away from creative and like that kind of stuff.
But you know how a lot of millennials don't like phone calls. They just like to text. But now,
Yeah.
if text is being done by agents, so the millennials are not even texting, so then uh, personal communication is really kind of gone at that point, right? So,
But to your point, yeah, I think the companies are going to do it. And one of the things I wanted to say is we should really thank OpenClaw for doing this in the open. The general community as well as the security community specifically has learned so much from this experiment and
yeah,
it still is.
yeah.
Whereas, this would all the same issues, every single issue we described would exist in any agent with similar features, but it would be in the dark. It would be behind a closed system. And there are amazing people at the companies you mentioned working on this, working on security, but it's just them versus this open experiment that everyone is contributing to allows us to learn a lot about this style of agent in the wild with potential risk, but a huge amount of learnings that comes out of it. So we really should be thankful that it happened there first. And now everything that we're learning over the past few weeks can be pulled into any of the agents you mentioned or any future ones, a startup or whatever, as well as the security companies like ours. We're learning an enormous amount in the process as well.
So in closing, so what are the three, I don't know, 1 to 3 kind of security lessons from this entire thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three areas that I see are, and these aren't necessarily good or bad. They're kind of both, right? The pace of development of this application means that it came out with a whole lot of security issues. But it also means that a whole lot of security issues got fixed at an unprecedented pace. We'd still be waiting for a patch from a traditional software provider, and they've patched like thousands of security problems. So like that pace is like the double-edged sword of using vibe coding and AI development practices. This design is what we were talking about. We're all learning from this design. This design does the features that we want, but not the security that we want. So now, how do we preserve the features that we want while building the security we need? This experiment is fantastic. I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone hook up their actual personal information to it, and a lot of enterprises are correctly blocking it. Like that's the right thing to do, but this experiment should continue because it's what we want. And then these emerging ecosystems like Moltbook, Claw Hub. There's like a Tinder site for agents now. Like there's some silly ones, but there's some fantastic ones as well. There's a Rent a Human. I don't know if you've seen that
Yeah.
one. Um, that ecosystem is also going to be a whole new surface. We have this saying that there's no new crimes, there's just new ways to execute them. And so with that whole surface, we will see new ways to execute the same old crimes, theft, information, privacy violations, espionage, all the same sort of things.
Huh. Interesting. So, what uh, w- w- what do you think the role of um, or I guess as far as you folks in the security space, uh, what does what have you learned as far as your tooling, where your tooling needs to improve, and what what issues did OpenClaw and Moltbook raise about uh, the suite of tools that you folks have?
Yeah, I think it cemented a trend that was already happening around skills. So skills aren't unique uh, to OpenClaw, but a lot of the focus around skills had been narrow to just coding agents, things like Claude Code or Codex or Cursor, whereas the interest in OpenClaw pulled skills out of that niche into the mainstream, like general purpose agent. And so I think we're seeing all across the AI security space this rapid growth in focusing on skills. Last year was about tools. Before that was about prompts. So skills being this new thing. Personally, I think we're seeing that we don't have the instruction hierarchy on the models correct yet. If your viewers aren't familiar with instruction hierarchy, it's this idea of prompts being system level or
Hmm.
user level or assistant or tool. And those are kind of the four basic ones that all the models support. But with the advent of skills, if you look at OpenClaw, the skills are just injected into the system prompt at that level. There's no way to say a skill has partial trust or a skill cannot override the rest of the system prompt. So that's why you see things like skills being easily able to shift the task. Um, and then I just think the growth and explosion of the these type of tools never builds observability in at the beginning. And so we'll see a focus on observability. Can we see the right parts of the interactions within the system? Do we have the hooks? We found through our investigation of OpenClaw that there wasn't one place where the LLM was called, which meant there wasn't one place where you could insert a hook to observe what the LLM itself, the model, the thing that is doing the generative piece, is actually receiving and sending back. It's scattered throughout the code. So that makes it very difficult to insert a guardrail like ours because it's in 5, 6, 10 different places. So those are some of the things we've seen.
And I guess Jason, um, so this was a unique experiment. There was one person released it to open source, vibe coded it. The next experiment, one may not be open source, right? Could be some company. Here's our personal agent assistant.
Yeah.
Um, and then secondly, that company may hire security companies and say, hey, we're releasing this and it's been blessed by the security companies who did whatever notion of red teaming and penetration testing is against this assistant. So you can trust us. So is it likely that the agents of the future will be open source or not? Assistants, I mean,
I think it'll be both.
they'll be both. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there will be agents integrated into because we already saw this bifurcation. There's kind of the computer use agent or agent that sits kind of between the keyboard and the chair, right?
Mhm.
replaces the human, and then agents that operate kind of on the back end.
No, but the notion of this personal assistant.
Right.
Do you think that the one that will blow up is most likely going to have some sort of open source uh, uh, credential as opposed to one? Obviously, Google and Apple are going to install these assistants on mobile phones, so people will use it by default. But on the computer, there might be an opportunity there for someone to do it much more responsibly, more systematically. But obviously, as we discussed earlier, the trade-off always is if you do it too responsibly, it may not be as capable, right?
Yeah, the problem with security is it's always in the way until it fails, and then you wish it was more, right? Security
Yeah,
blocks you from doing what you want to do until it doesn't block the attacker, and then you complain about that. So it's
like if you somehow, if you and your colleagues somehow were approached by this developer of OpenClaw, hey, I'm about to launch this OpenClaw, uh, here it is, then you might have been able to fix it up front, right? Some
I
of the
think
issues,
I think some of it, yeah.
some of the issues, right? So,
Certainly, there were a bunch of design decisions we covered in detail in our blog. We talked about some of them today that could have been improved, I think, before launching, inserting the right guardrails in the right place. Some of it, like I said earlier, is we want something that the models can't support yet. We want something where the models make.
and also some of it with a system like this, to what extent are some of these security flaws only visible once it's out in the wild?
I think there's some of that.
Yeah.
Um, I think there was a little over optimism in this case. So some of this was very much we knew the instant we saw it, and we were right.
And
But
by the way, one thing that might make these personal assistants secure in the long run is that um, the people using them heavily will want to have more visibility as to what they're doing, mainly because they're burning so much tokens. And you want to understand what's going on. How come I'm getting charged so much money? And then
yeah,
maybe that's kind of like the way security starts asserting itself when, because you need observability and monitoring just because of token economics, then
yeah,
security, uh, uh, while an afterthought, becomes elevated, right? So.
yeah, and I think we'll see more complex agents that are decoupled from the model so that the model can be selected based on the task. We see some of that in coding agents already. If you're doing planning for a large project, you use a big model like Opus. If you're fixing a bug in a function, you use a small model like Haiku, right? You could do more of that. Um, some of them could even just run locally on your machine and cost nothing
But
but
you're talking
electricity.
about sophisticated users here, right? So,
No, I'm saying that the agents themselves will
oh, I
trend
see.
that way for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
economic reason, right?
yeah,
Opus doesn't need to do every single task that these agents are doing right now. It's very
yeah.
expensive token wise.
No, I've been pushing people to what I call the oxygen development stack, which is open code plus open router for that reason. And with that, thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much. Good to be here again.